This is more Doug DeMuro, and this is my 1999 Mercedes-Benz G500 Cabriolet, also known as the world's most overpriced Suzuki sidekick. I recently took my G500 Cabriolet off-roading in the desert, and so today I am going to show you something you've never seen before, a Mercedes-Benz G500 Cabriolet off-roading. Now, before we get started, an important point here. Yes, I know that you have been off-roading before, and my off-roading is lame and pathetic by comparison, and you could do these trails in your Honda Accord with your eyes closed, which is pretty much the comments on every off-roading video in history, unless the off-roading vehicle literally tumbles end over end down a mountain. And even then, people are like, I could have tumbled end over end down that mountain way easier in my Miata with street tires. But here's the thing, my G500 is valuable, even though this is pretty much just a Suzuki sidekick with a power top and a Mercedes badge on the front. These are worth well over $100,000. I didn't want to do anything risky or stupid and mess it up. Also, this car is on street tires, and not just that, but winter street tires, so it doesn't have the capability and the traction and the off-roadness of like a purpose-built off-roader. So no, I wasn't gonna go on any insane, crazy trails. I didn't want to damage anything. Basically, I just wanted to take it off-roading for a couple hours and film it. So here we go. Alright, so off-roading in Southern California generally involves driving out to the desert, which pretty much looks like this. And I gotta say, the best thing about the G500 is just how well it handles normal driving. I have another off-roader, my 1997 Land Rover Defender, and it's almost unbelievable to me how much better the G is at just driving around normally. If you have the top up and you're on a smooth road, the G500 just drives along. It can easily cruise at 90 miles an hour without any issue, and with only a little wind rush in the soft top. We found that driving this thing an hour or two out to the desert was really no problem at all, very smooth, very comfortable. We thought it handled it just fine. And by the way, I should clarify who we is. This is my friend Sam. He came along for this little off-roading excursion, and I will link his Instagram below. I mentioned Sam because you may see him driving in some clips, and if you're wondering who's driving my G500 who isn't me, well, it's Sam. Sam has an Audi SQ5 with blacked out badges, and ladies, he's single. But anyway, back to the driving. So we drove along the highway for an hour, 2 hours, until we got to the off-roading spot, and then we drove along some roads that looked like this. The G500 Cabriolet handled this stuff no problem, but basically anything with any level of ground clearance probably could have, so it's not much of a feat. The road did take us to the top of a hill overlooking a vast expanse of desert though, and I gotta admit it's pretty cool seeing the G out there like this because it just looks so alien. For one thing, a convertible G-Wagen looks pretty alien to begin with, to put it charitably, but nobody takes these newer power top G-Wagen Cabriolet models off-road, even though they're very capable. So it's neat to see it sort of perched in this rugged landscape. But anyway, this is fairly easy stuff, and it wouldn't satisfy my off-roading desires for the G. So we went back down this hill, and again, it's a fairly simple trail that you don't even need four-wheel drive for. And then we headed out on a dusty road toward the actual mountains themselves, just to see what kind of trails we could find for a little more effort. Now, quickly, we did find some trails, and they involved the G500 Cabriolet climbing up this rocky hill. And this is where the G500 Cabriolet owner starts to get a little nervous because, well, you don't want to mess anything up going over rocks and boulders, especially when you're in the middle of nowhere like this. You snap something, you damage something, it's going to be some tough times. But once again, the G500 handled it no problem. Here it is getting up a hill without really any struggle at all. Although again, this isn't really that much. The G just really needed ground clearance to handle that, not really any capability. Though once you're at the top of the hill, there are some pretty cool views. Take a look. Now, one cool thing about off-roading in the G Cabriolet is that it's really small, which makes it very nimble. Here it is negotiating around a tight corner, no backing up, no getting out to check where the edges are. This vehicle is 7 inches narrower than a Ford Explorer, and it's actually narrower than a Ford Focus. That's actually true. And the G is less than 170 inches in length, so it's almost a foot shorter than a Mazda CX-5, which is just a compact SUV. Basically, this thing's size makes it absolutely perfect for trails, even better than the four-door version. One issue with the G, though, is these running boards, which sort of enhance the luxury look of the G Cabriolet, but they're kind of annoying off-road. Here we found a relatively steep hill to climb, especially for a car on street tires, so I locked the differential and I started to go up and kept going and going. This hill scared me because the angle is way more severe than you'd think from this video. You feel like you're steering straight up, but of course the G handled it with no problem. But at the very top you can see some dust come out from under the car. That's where the side skirts scraped the dirt below me. If you actually want to use the G as an off-roader, you would want to remove these side skirts and replace them with rock rails, which will add ground clearance and a little bit more toughness to the breakover point of the car. Anyway, once the G made it over that hill, we drove along next to some mesas, and I have to say, it was a really cool look, contrasting the rather interesting appearance of the G-Wagen with this beautiful natural landscape. Take a look. And eventually it was time to get back out over the same hill where we started. Now, a constant problem we were having all day was tires. Even with the center diff lock, this area just gets so little rain that it's all loose rocks, very dry dirt, and the tires were always having trouble getting traction, which usually meant backing up and taking a different line until something worked. Eventually, though, this hill worked and the G managed to make its way over and onto the next obstacle. Obviously, if you were a real off-roader, you would get off-road tires, which would make quick work of this stuff. But I mostly drive this thing on the street, and off-road tires add noise for street driving. So for now, I'll stick with my highly useful winter street tires here in San Diego. Now, the ultimate challenge for the G500 Cabriolet came at the end of the day, and again, it came down to tires. Once again, we drove down a rather rocky trail, this time for quite a while, which isn't much fun, and you always wonder if something's going to damage your car, and you're getting bumped around, and it's not comfortable at all. But at the end of the trail, the G came to a relatively steep hill with really loose rocks, and with Sam driving, it struggled to make any progress. The tires were spinning and having a ton of trouble gaining traction and not getting basically anywhere at all up this hill. Again, this hill was steeper than it looks on camera, which is sort of always the problem with off-roading videos, but even without the steepness, the G just couldn't handle it because of the street tires and the traction issues. Now, obviously, Sam was a little nervous about taking any risks with someone else's rather expensive vehicle with hard-to-find parts in the middle of the desert, so I offered to switch with him to give it a shot to get up the hill myself. Now, first, I was pretty successful, as you can see. I have more off-roading experience than Sam, and I was able to get about a quarter of the way up. But as you can see, it didn't last long, and eventually I got bogged down too. You can see just how much the tires are spinning and just how much the G wasn't budging. The trail was so loose, just a bunch of dry rocks and sand, and you don't want to do too much of this stuff. You get the wheels spinning really fast, the car's not going anywhere, that's when you snap something under the car, or that's when a rock gets kicked back and damages bodywork or some other piece below the car. So you don't really want to do this all that much. So with that in mind, I was about to give up, just back up and turn around, when I decided to give it one last shot. So I locked all 3 differentials. That's one of the cool things about the G. You have a locking front, center, and rear differential, which really does enhance its off-road capabilities. And then I took the hill really slowly and after that, the G made it to the top, and it was rewarded with an amazing view down the whole area, this sweeping panorama of, well, desert, and then more desert, and then more desert, but it was still cool to be at the top of it, especially knowing the G had successfully climbed a difficult obstacle. And in the end, the G made its climb back down the hill, nice and slow, just like it went up. And of course, going down was a lot easier than going up. Pretty much just required staying in the lines of the trail and braking rationally. And eventually, we were back down and on our way home. Now, on the drive back, you are the only G500 Cabriolet owner out in the desert. In fact, I have a VIN list of every single G-Class Cabriolet that has ever had a Carfax hit in North America, and there are only 10 of these registered in California. So it's safe to say I probably won't be encountering another one out here. Now, we spent about 3 hours out on the trails. I just kind of showed you some of the highlights, but you may be wondering, how did it go? Well, like you saw, it wasn't really insane off-roading. It wasn't anything particularly difficult or scary. I didn't break anything. I didn't get stuck in any mud. It was just some pretty reasonable stuff to kind of try to break in the G and see what it was capable of in its current state. Two things stood out to me. One, the size is just fantastic. The overhangs are small, it's narrow, it's nimble, it's powerful enough for the size, and I do think this is legitimately the best off-roader on the G-Wagen platform, save for the 4x4 squared and the G650 lawn delay with their portal axles. But compared to the regular four-door G-Wagen, this is more nimble, it's smaller, better breakover angle, and just littler and more maneuverable on the trails, which is really important. Ask any Jeep Wrangler owner, the majority of serious off-roaders get the two-door model. It's just easier to get places. The other thing that stood out to me about the G-Cab is it's just amazing how versatile this car is. I know it's ugly, I know it's weird, but you can cruise down the Pacific Coast Highway in Newport Beach in this G-Wagen, driving your special car with the wind in your hair, or you can cruise on the highway at 90 miles an hour smoothly with absolutely no problem. Turn on the cruise control, the heated seats, very smooth, very easy highway cruiser. Or you can also go out into the desert, get on some trails, climb some hills, and generally kind of roll over whatever you want to. No, it's not a Lamborghini in terms of driving fun, but it is pretty enjoyable to drive because it's weird and special. And it's not an S-Class on the highway, but it is pretty comfortable, especially for what it is. And it's not a lifted Wrangler off-road, but it is pretty capable. And I think if you really wanted to make it into an off-roader, you could get to the Wrangler's capabilities and probably past it thanks to the triple lockers. Really, it's an excellent combination of all three, kind of a fun car and a highway cruiser and an off-roader. And for as weird and as bizarre and as ugly as this thing is, I have to admit, I really like it. And I've been driving it a lot more than my Defender, which is sad, but just kind of a reality. But anyway, there's a look at the first off-roading adventure for the G-Class Cabriolet.